John, have I told you I'm addicted to Carwell's auctions?
You might have mentioned it, yeah.
Well, they're online 6 days a week. They're getting 20,000 fresh vehicles in every month. It's actually one of my best sources of quality stock. Listings have got plenty of photos, service history, and background checks for peace of mind. And you can pay sellers in a click with Carwell Wallet. They even transport your car with built in protection of up to £25,000.
Well, that's more than you will ever need.
Exactly, John. So, dealers, if you're not on CarWow, you really should get in on the auction. See what I've done, John?
Oh, God.
Anyway, to find out more, sign up for free at carwow.co.uk/partners/auctions.
Welcome back to the Car Dealer Podcast, where we pick our favourite stories of the week and ask an industry guest to choose which were the best. I'm John Ray, and joining me this week, as usual, it's James Baggett. James, lovely to see you, and also lovely to be quite far away from you for a change. No offence.
That sounds like a gloat, that, John. Do you want to tell the listeners why you wedged that ridiculous sentence into the opening paragraph?
It's a humble brag, really, James. But I thought it was nice to demonstrate that I'm not always 3 doors down the corridor from you in your spare room.
Yeah, that's true. Where are you, John? Tell me about where you are.
I'm in Montana.
Interesting. And why are you in Montana?
I'm in Montana. This won't make any more sense, but I'm in Montana for a Bentley launch.
Oh, wow. I mean, they say nurses have it tough. What Bentley launch is it, John?
Well, it's a multiple vehicle launch, but it's mainly the Bentayga Speed, which is the fastest Bentayga, hence the name.
Why are they doing it in Montana and not Crewe?
Well, I actually asked them this, although they did volunteer that information to me later anyway. And as it turns out, have you heard of a program called Yellowstone?
No.
Right. Well, there's a program called Yellowstone, James, and it's a drama about owning a ranch in Montana, being very rich, and all the problems that come from being extremely rich. And Bentley's head of communications is a big fan of this program.
Right.
And decided to do the launch here, themed around that. And also snuck in a bit of product placement into about Series 3 of it with a Continental GT.
Amazing. Does that mean you've been wearing like cowboy boots and a cowboy hat?
Sort of.
Have you actually got one there? Oh my God.
I accessorised for the event, James. No, all the Bentley people have been wearing cowboy hats, but I'm not quite brave enough to do that. But I am in a very nice hotel with a view of some trees.
Lovely. I mean, it looks very nice. I mean, it's no gospel, but that is very nice. I mean, those people listening on Spotify will now have to go and look at the video on YouTube just to see your ridiculous. What are they, trousers?
Yes.
Trousers, yeah.
But there is a matching jacket.
Excellent. And I see this trip has sparked a lot more of your social media binge, John.
James.
I see you've had many more posts on Instagram now. Have you had lots of followers off the back of the podcast?
I'm not looking for followers, James. I'm just bolstering my social media output, that's all.
Well, while you've been sunning yourself in Montana and jet setting around the world, do you want to hear about what I've been doing?
Not really, but yeah, go on.
Well, I've been... have a guess at how many cars we've got in stock at the Clever Car Collection.
15.
No, 27. It's escalated. It's escalated.
Hang on. So just walk me through that. How many slots have you got on Auto Trader? 7?
7, yeah. So there's quite a few in the prep queue. There's quite a few prep queue. We've been battling with those Japanese imports this week, which has been a massive headache. We had to give the government notice of vehicle arrival. Nova.
Oh, Nova, yeah.
Nova, yeah. And the
You've done that like 3 weeks ago.
I think we probably should have done, if I'm honest. But the website is one of those government websites where they don't really want you to use it. You know, when it's like really, really old and really small in the corner of the screen because they haven't updated it. It was one of those. And then we put in all the details. Joe and I spent about an hour doing it yesterday, and it immediately emailed us saying, you must call us immediately. You must call the Nova department. We rang the Nova department, and it said, this telephone line is no longer in operation. So we rang somebody else from HMRC, and they said, "Oh yeah, you can't call Nova. They've got rid of all of their phone lines." So you've just got to send them an email, even though they sent us an email saying you must call us immediately. So that's part of the fun and games I've had this week, John. And do you remember the couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months back, the scooter that we were donated by Carwell? I put in a customer's boot, and it went on a little trip to
Eastbourne or somewhere, yeah.
Eastbourne, yeah. I've done it again, John. It's now in Salisbury. I realised it yesterday when I was like, "Oh, where's the scooter? I need to go to the garage." Oh yeah, it's in the back of a Dacia Sandero. So there's a 17-year-old boy who thought that he'd won the lottery with a scooter in the back of it. Yeah, so it's been one of those weeks. If I'm honest, it's been one of those weeks. Yeah. Anyway, I won't bore you anymore because a lot has been happened, but I'm sure it will come up as part of the chat we're going to have with our fantastic guest.
Absolutely. So joining us this week is Tom Leathes, co-founder and CEO of Motorway. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, chaps.
Nice to see you, Tom. Sorry you had to listen to that drivel, but that is.
I'm very jealous of John's Montana hotel, experience. It looks very nice.
Well, I mean, they prepared this room for me, which is why there's a photo of me just behind me here. It's a horse for listeners.
It's a horse. It's a horse.
Carry on,
right.
Tom.
Excellent. Tom, nice to see you. I mean, there's lots of stuff that I want to ask you about. We will go in. We will start with some. No, we won't start with some motorway stuff. We'll get on to motorway stuff. Let's start with AI because this week it's been quite an exciting topic for me. I haven't told John this yet, but we actually finally managed to deploy some real life AI on the Clever Car Collection website. So we've been working with Impel, and the chat AI functionality is now live on the homepage of the Clever Car Collection website. It is really, really good. We had to train it with a load of information. It scrapes the website first, which is it's a new website. It's been launched by 67 Degrees for us. But we had to train it with a load of questions. So we were sent a lot of questions from Impel. We had to fill out all of that. And it's now out there sort of discussing things with customers without us knowing. But you've had quite a bit of experience with AI, haven't you? I mean, have you seen any great examples of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone is playing with it, right, in different ways. I mean, we've been using AI, machine learning, and some of these tools within the product for quite a long time. We've got some great talent that are really kind of working on the cutting edge of it, and so that's given us a lot of product benefit. We're able to make the experience a lot better for customers in multiple ways with it. I think one of the things we're thinking about most at the moment is how we drive the internal adoption of AI tools to improve productivity within the business. And I think what's interesting about it, and I'm pretty sure that this is the same in every business, and all of our dealer partners as well, is that everyone's playing around with it at the moment. So people are using ChatGPT for customer communications. They're uploading spreadsheets and doing analysis with it. The challenge, I think, for organizations is to pull out all of that best practice and make sure that it's shared. And that's something we've been spending a lot of time on over the course of this year, which has had some real benefits. And we're seeing that with lots of our partners as well when we ask them how they're using it. A couple practical tips is we are trying to generate the best use cases that people are doing across the business, whether, product and engineering is more obvious. They're obviously deep in these tools and they're using it to help code and so on. But even in legal teams, customer service, marketing, there's lots of really interesting things that people have done. And so we're making sure that's shared across the organization. And then the best practice things we're then putting into our training for new starters. So we're starting to try and really embed that activity. But we're talking to dealers about it a lot as well. And I think the challenge there is it's a topic that comes up in almost every conference, every podcast. And I think the gap is that everyone knows this is happening and it's a huge era change. But we need to get down to what are some practical do today things that are useful for dealers to do. And we had a conference recently for some of our biggest buyers, and we talked about AI, which was definitely really interesting. I think we had a lot of engagement, but some of the feedback afterwards was like, please give us, 6 things that dealers are doing that I can go home and do tomorrow. So that's something we're really thinking about, how we can kind of help bridge that gap. And we hear such interesting stories now of it. I'd love to hear how you're using it. And I know having chatbots and automated customer service is something I think everyone's looking at. But what are the day-to-day things that you're doing, particularly in your dealership? A couple of interesting ones I've heard recently. Mechanics in the service center, when they're coming up against electrical problems, taking photos of that, uploading it to ChatGPT and saying, what's going on here? And it will have a conversation. It will go, well, you need to take that off and show me the kind of, the bit underneath. And then it will say, right, move the red wire to here. You can tell I'm not an electrician, but
Me neither, don't we?
but it tells you what to do. And this dealer was saying that there are a couple of the mechanics that are using it and are just getting stuff done so much more quickly. And again, it's then the question of like, well, make sure that all the other mechanics at least talk to them and understand how they're using it. So I think there's some really good use cases cropping up that I think just need to be highlighted a lot more for people.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that the thing I find with AI is remembering to use it. It's often as humans we just go about solving the problem ourselves really quickly. I mean, take an example. This week we were sent this huge list of questions from Impel that we needed to feed into AI. So it's loads of questions about my business, which I just like. It was general stuff like how often do you open, how do you deal with the part exchange. So what Joe and my colleague and I did is we just sat down with a voice note and we answered all of these questions as a conversation. We just went through them and said, right, when do we open? We gave that answer in voice. I then uploaded that entire transcription. It was about 35 minutes long. That entire voice note into transcription service. It transcribed all of the conversation we had. I then put that into ChatGPT with all of the questions that we had to answer and said to ChatGPT, I've given you all the answers. These are all the questions. Can you put it all into one big document? And very rapidly, within seconds, it spat out all of that information. Well, if I was going to have to sit down and answer all of those by text, it would have taken me all afternoon, if not all the next day. And it's like it was only when I actually thought there is a quicker way around this that saved me a huge amount of time. And I think it's working out where you can get those efficiencies. I don't think AI is going to replace loads of things, but it's going to make people more efficient in their current jobs. And we've certainly seen that in our business.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a really good use case. Just all the follow-up that you wish you had time to do is something that you can really leverage for that, just, individually as you're going through your day. So that's a really exciting time, but it's moving so quickly that it is difficult to keep up with it. And of course, we've all got businesses to run at the same time. So helping everyone work together and just making sure you're sharing best practice feels like a really good thing to focus on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the other thing that I did with it this week is I took a photo of the Japanese import certificate or import sheet, which was impossible for me to understand, but had all of the information I needed on it for this Nova form. So I'd ask it, where's the chassis number on here? What's the import number? What's the product code? And it obviously could translate that immediately and fire that out. And we're talking tiny point fonts. It was very, very difficult to see, but it got it all correct. I'm thinking, well, that saved me a huge amount of time. I don't actually know how you would have done that in the past. You would have had to have found someone who could speak Japanese.
Yeah. Do you use it much in your sourcing kind of processes? Like when you're uploading, I don't know, stock sheets from auctions and, retail rate, are you pulling all that together using AI? Or are you doing that more manually with spreadsheets?
we do a lot of it manually with spreadsheets, unless we're looking at a whole the whole of the UK. When we buy cars, we just try and buy locally, so we don't have to travel too far. We're
Yeah.
starting to slowly extend that a little bit, so we can do collections. But yes, we have uploaded large amounts of data into it and cross-referenced it with Auto Trader's retail ratings and all of that sort of information, and it does spit out good data, but also the stuff that John's done when it just comes with manipulating the spreadsheet has been just as good. And actually, John, it's been just as quick, hasn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. I guess, I mean, we're talking about a year ago now, aren't we? The last time we tried to do that, and it wasn't hugely successful because partially it's all about knowing how to leverage, how to talk to ChatGPT properly, which I think at the time you didn't. You were very like, "Hello there, Mr. ChatGPT. May I bother you for a list of the top vehicles of this?" Come on, friends.
Yeah.
But some of it was that it hallucinated and made up stuff.
Yeah, well, and also if you're making like a £10,000 buying decision based on something that's spat out, you want to pretty much manually check that before you do it. So yeah, it makes sense.
I mean, it's something I've long wanted. I've long wanted to be able to say to ChatGPT in the morning, upload all of the different auction lists from your platform and all the others out there, and just say, right, you know what I like to buy. You can have because this is all the stuff that I've sold in the last year. What can you find in today's auctions all over the UK for me? And it's at that point, I think it would be incredibly useful for dealers. Anyway, let's move on from AI. Let's start talking a little bit about motorway, because I was very lucky to be invited to your conference recently, and we had a chat, didn't we, on the stage there about how the business is going. But there wasn't many people there compared to those. Sorry.
I was just going to say you did put me on the spot quite a lot, but I think that was good, and I think you got some good questions in there.
Sorry, I'll try not to ask all of them over again. But there was about 100 of your biggest buyers there, but there's a lot more people listening today. So let's cover some of those topics. I mean, firstly, just tell us a little bit about the growth that you've experienced with motorway over the last few months. I mean, I've noticed that the auctions are now regularly over 1,500 cars on a daily basis, sometimes getting closer to 2,000. I mean, how's that growth happened, and is it going to continue?
Yeah, it's been a really strong year for us so far. I mean, this is an ambitious year for us. We have very big plans this year. And obviously the first quarter of the year is when you do a lot of your growth in this market. So it's really critical. We had a lot happening. We made a lot of platform upgrades. We also launched a brand new brand campaign on TV and radio. Hopefully some of you have seen that. And we've refreshed all of our applications. So there's been quite a big kind of product upgrade, quite a lot of marketing, but a lot of it actually is on the dealer side, where the improvements that we've been making to the platform, they happen consistently over a very long period of time. We've been spending a lot of time in the past 2 years on the last mile. So that's what happens after the auction when you win a car, and that's everything from transport, on-site inspection, payments. Obviously, motorway pay has been a massive focus for us for the past 12 months. So all of that really has led to process getting better and easier for dealers, and process gets better for dealers, then they buy more cars, and that's why we spend so much time on it. And of course, it's a marketplace, so the more buying activity we have, the more we're able to attract more sellers, and the two very much go together. So no, we're really excited about the start of this year. You're right, we've hit over 2,000 cars in the sale now very frequently. That's kind of a new operating cadence for us. And that comes with lots more operations. So of course we've got to handle all of that in the back end, but we're able to do that a lot more smoothly now than we ever were before. So I feel like we're kind of, I wouldn't say through our teenage phase, but I feel like we're now capable of handling a lot more volume through the platform and supporting dealers at that much higher level of scale. So yeah, it's really exciting.
Could you imagine a day would come where you're selling 2,000 cars a day? When you started this platform, I remember hearing at the conference you were doing deals on WhatsApp, weren't you, with dealers? Right,
it was all on WhatsApp at the beginning. We were speaking. I mean, bear in mind, I didn't come from the car industry, so I was schooled very heavily in trying to broker car deals between private sellers and dealers. And so yeah, we used to speak to the sellers. They used to WhatsApp us photos of the car. we would send them often over WhatsApp to dealers, and then we'd have lots of back and forth where the dealers would say, "I need to see the tire treads, I need to see the service history," and that actually is what formed the product. So we used the feedback from dealers that really told us what they needed in order to set a bid that they would stand behind online. And so that was a good year and a half of us, really building very close relationships with a lot of dealers who were very kind to us in the days when it was pretty clear we were learning. But I think that was because we were very much listening and we were building the product based on their needs. And so that really kind of formed the product, and we've continued to take that approach now. So we're still taking the feedback from dealers and their pain points and feeding that into our roadmap, and that tends to be where we put most of our time, is in trying to fix those problems. And that's actually where some of our biggest product launches recently, like Pay as a good example. It's really hard if you're buying on motorway and you're buying significant volume to do that when you've got to process payments individually to each customer. I mean, that's doable when you're doing a few a week, but if you're doing hundreds a week, it doesn't anymore become possible without a very large team of people in the dealership processing all that admin. And we had to solve that to sort of unlock that next level of growth and allow dealers to really buy in bulk through us, rather than doing the kind of dipping into motorway for special cars, but buying the bulk in some of the more traditional auctions. And so that's really a really critical thing we had to do to unlock that.
What was the eureka moment, Tom, when you realised, back in the day, you're doing negotiating these deals via WhatsApp? When was the point where you went, this is going to work? It's hard now, but this is definitely going to work. What was it?
I think for any business, it's about the outcomes that customers are getting. So the eureka moment was pretty early on, in that, we were cold calling car dealers with cars we were finding through the internet, through a very basic website that we were attracting customers through. And by brokering these sales and the back and forth on all the information, and then the deal would get done. And actually, it was just the feedback in that the seller was getting a much better price than they could anywhere else. And yet the dealer was paying less than they were paying in the auction. And that's because we were removing the typical middlemen and making it happen extremely quickly. And so that really is when we realized there's something very real here, because there's a proper economic outcome. But I think startups, particularly technology startups, spend a lot of time worrying about product. That's the right thing to do. How it looks, how it feels. Ultimately, though, unless you're really delivering a much better outcome economically to your customers, you're probably not going to change any behavior for the long term. So that was the real thing that kind of made us know that we were on something really important.
And you covered this at the conference as well, but it's a question I'd like to ask again. I mean, who do you work for? Is it the consumers or is it the dealers? I mean, it's an age-old marketplace problem, isn't it? You're sort of you're the middleman, aren't you?
I mean, the genuine answer is that it's both, and that we can't deliver a great service to dealers without attracting consumers to the website and doing an amazing job in serving those customers to get the cars for sale easily. But ultimately, our customers, the people who pay us, are the car dealers, and so they are our customer base and our partners. And so we serve them in terms of how we deliver the service and how we improve the service and how we generate results for them. But it is a marketplace, and actually, I've never done a marketplace before. I've had web internet businesses before, but a true marketplace where you're having to balance supply and demand is a really tricky thing, and it's really hard to get the two balanced all the time. Pricing's a great example. We have to get the pricing right for consumers, and that has to be attractive to them, right? So the prices have to be good and highly competitive with what they can get elsewhere, or why would they come to us? But at the same time, we have to keep the prices as low as possible for dealers so that they're making a good margin on the cars. And so that is a constant, very fine balance to try and get that part right. And so, marketplace is very interesting challenge, and it's always a bit like whack-a-mole. You do one thing here and it sort of has an impact there, and so you're constantly trying to, it's a bit like lightning in a bottle. But we're getting a lot better at, I think, at knowing what the inputs are and making sure we get it right.
Tom, you've raised a lot of money for this business, haven't you? You've had a lot of inward investment from some very big VCs. What was it like when you were out there pitching this business to them? What was it that caught their eye, do you think?
Well, the first few years of Motorway, we didn't have a lot of money. In fact, very little. We self-funded the business at the beginning. We didn't raise any money until it was making money, because we had been through, my last business didn't work out, which was also venture backed. We never got profitable, wasn't growing enough. That was an extremely painful process. So when we started Motorway, that was the kind of origin story of it, was like, we need to really learn from that and make sure we do it differently this time. And so, the first few years we were very lean. We didn't burn much money. We only really raised significant amounts of venture capital money when we got to 2021, which is 4 or 5 years after we started. And the reason we did that was that the growth was extremely fast at that point. And as an example, we went from a couple hundred dealers to a couple thousand in a matter of months post-COVID. And there were very few places that people could transact in that point. And so we had too many customers than we could handle. And it was starting to degrade the platform. We were having sellers that were taking an hour to get through to our call center because the call queues were so long. And so we never set out to raise lots of money, but we knew that we had something that was really resonating, and yet we weren't able to scale up the operation rapidly enough to serve those customers well. And so that was the time when we were like, right, now we need to, it's the right time and the right reason to raise a lot of money and make sure we can build that platform underneath so we can serve the customers better. But to your question, I mean, we had a lot of skepticism when we were pitching the business to investors. We had other well-known car venture sort of things going on at the time, where other companies raising huge amounts of money, much more than us. Lots of questions about how we were going to win. What was it that would make it special? Questions about whether the post-COVID market would remain intact, whether this was still relevant in a normal market. So we had lots of questions like that, all of which were fair questions. But we just looked at the outcomes we were having from customers and the feedback from dealers we were working with. And that was all we needed to know, that this wasn't just a flash in the pan. But no, we found some investors that were really, understood our vision, believed in the way that we thought about it. And we're very, very lucky to get them on board.
Tom, very nice to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. I am going to do something very awkward now, John. But as you know, I am a lifeboat coxswain, and the lifeboat pager has just gone off. So I'm going to have to depart and head down to the station. However, my colleague Rebecca is available to sub in for me, so she will join you for the second part of the podcast, and I'm going to run away. So I'm very sorry about that. But nice to see you, Tom. But I better get down to the station.
Thanks, James. Nice to see you.
See you later. Becca,
well, this seems like a great opportunity for an ad break.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye, James.
We'll be right back. Now, John, I'm really enjoying how easy it is to pay sellers on CarWow.
I mean, presume you'd rather not pay them at all.
No, that is true. But now I can do it with CarWow Wallet. You can pay sellers, finance houses, and more instantly, literally in one click. It's secure, easy to use, and gets rid of all the pesky finance back and forth. It's a total game changer, John.
That does sound pretty good.
If you want to find out more, dealers can log on to carwow.co.uk/partners/carwow-wallet. Now, back to the podcast.
So, hello, Rebecca.
Hello, John.
Well, this is a first for us. I quite like this. Well, I was about to hand this over to James because he won last week, but I'm aware you've just been sat in a seat and and haven't looked at any stories yet. So shall I start? Would that be a bit easier?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Lovely. Okay. Well, I'm going to start with my. Do you know? I haven't even said how this podcast works. Not that everyone doesn't know already. But Becca and I are going to run through our favourite stories of the week, and at the end, Tom gets to decide which one of us chose the best ones and who is the winner. So I'm going to start with news from Marshall and Stellantis. So we've seen over the last few weeks and months, gradually Stellantis dealerships have been disappearing from Marshall's books, shall we say. You know, they've terminated quite a few dealerships from Vauxhall, Peugeot, Citroën, etc., here and there. But they've now come to the conclusion that they're just going to get rid of all of them altogether. So the ones that were remaining, there's a handful left, 5 Vauxhall and Peugeot sites. Cambridge, Gatwick, Medway, and St Neots near Cambridge. And one in a Vauxhall dealership in Ipswich as well. Marshall have just decided to get rid of all of them and say no more Stellantis, which is a bit of a surprise, really. Clearly, there's something either Marshall or Stellantis aren't getting on very well with each other, because this is not a case of naturally closing down these dealerships because there's, Peugeot have decided they've got too many dealerships in a particular area. Because a lot of this, particularly ones in Kent, say, leaves Stellantis with not much representation at all for, say, Peugeot. And Stellantis have said they're committed to finding new partners for these sites. So it's quite different to the ones that came before in, say, can't remember where it was, Ashford and Canterbury and so on, where it was just a case of, it was said at the time it was a mutual agreement that these were going to be closed. So the sad news, of course, is that there's jobs at risk for all of these things, because that's how things go. There's that we know of, no new partners lined up for these sites. So it's not a very pleasant time for the people working in them. But I thought it was a really interesting turn of events to get rid of all your Stellantis dealerships. And it
Did
was
you
just
say how many sites that is?
How many sites?
Yeah.
It's 5.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, crucially as well, a lot of them are the ex-Motorline sites that they purchased back in before Constellation came over and
Yeah, the
bought
last
Marshall.
big deal Dash did, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And they've lost quite a lot of these sites. They lost all the Toyota ones because Toyota said, we don't really want you doing this anymore, Marshall. I'm paraphrasing. So they've all gone to Stephen Eagle and so on. I mean, what did you think of this, Becca?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely sad. I do sort of think it's like it is a small part of their operation, isn't it, Stellantis? But again, it is strange to cut out things unless they're really not working for you.
Mm.
And I don't know.
Yeah, it's very odd.
Yeah, I don't know if Stellantis is a bit of a weird. This is a very sweeping statement, but it's quite a lot of cars that are similar but serve different purposes. So maybe that is a difficult sell in that area. I don't know.
I mean, the other thing is Stellantis, like any manufacturer, is trying to downsize the number of partners it has. It's just, to me, when they say downsize the number of partners, what I imagine is all the little, relatively minnow dealer groups, or not even dealer groups, but individual dealers who have a Vauxhall or a Citroën or whatever franchise. They're losing their sites. I just didn't think it would be Marshall. I thought it'd be the Marshalls of this world getting all the contracts. But
yeah, I mean, but maybe in that area, they're a small fry. When you say 5 dealerships, it's not really loads, is it?
no, but it was a lot more once upon a time.
Yes.
Tom, I'm coming for you for comment, but feel free to.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's never nice to hear about jobs being at risk in any context. I don't think I have anything specific to say on this one, other than, there is a lot happening. It feels like there's more change happening at the moment, not just across dealership groups, but obviously across the industry. And obvious things, Chinese, new Chinese brands, EVs, all of these things. And so all businesses are having to be as lean and as agile as they possibly can be. And I should think that just changes and maybe speeds up some decisions that might have otherwise taken a lot longer and could have been a lot more considered. I obviously don't know anything about this, what the thinking behind this is, but it's clear we're seeing a lot more of this kind of change and consolidation at the moment than we've seen for a long time. So, and I think that probably just tracks along with all the change that's happening in the broader industry, and these companies just have to be as agile as they possibly can be.
I mean, the other possibility is they're moving away from volume brands, which would be quite a broad move for an organisation as big as Marshall. But there we are. We'll see, I suppose. Right, over to Rebecca.
I feel like so much pressure now. I've not been in for the last 3 days, so I feel like everybody just give me a hard time about this. But I'm going to go for a story I wrote, obviously, which was some Auto Trader data about how demand for EVs has been going up as prices go down. But I just thought the figures in this I thought were quite interesting. Tumbling EV prices saw demand up 31% in May. So in particular areas in the market, prices were down like loads and loads. Try and pull them out on the fly. Consumer demand grew 31%, while prices fell 7.4% for EVs aged 3 to 5 years old, down 11.6% to an average of 18,000 for older ones. Yeah, it's. I just thought it was quite interesting that they were seeing such a rise. It seemed like a massive rise to me, and that the prices were dropping so much at the same time in what's been quite a, I don't want to say boring time for car prices and values, but yeah, that sort of stood out. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I mean, I always like picking out they've helpfully given us a list, haven't they, of the risers and fallers. So the biggest drops, BMW i5, 21.7% down year on year. This is May 2025 compared to May 2024. And they're all quite chunky, you know, like the smallest one there in the top 10 is a 12.8% drop for a Renault Zoe.
Yeah. But when you look at the names as well, though, these are all, well, not all, but a lot of them are reasonably new ones, aren't they?
Yeah,
and you would assume on a spec'd up i5, I would assume there is quite a steep drop off in how much you can sell a used i5 for that sort of price.
I think the interesting thing as part of this story is that it's tracking the drop against an increase in demand. So, I mean, what are the? It's almost like it's going against the supply and demand kind of thing, isn't it? It's fundamentally prices are dropping, and everyone's going, "Do you know what? I'll have a punt on one of those."
It's sort of what they need, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think as well, what will be interesting is what happens. As I said a few weeks ago, what happens over the next 24 months or so, because last year was a proper push market for EVs. And unless I've misinterpreted how the ZEV mandate is going to work this year, I think there's more leverage this year for manufacturers. I mean, we've already seen a few kind of slightly edging away from EVs. They can make up a lot of difference by CO2 emission changes, I think, this year. So I suspect there's going to be a little bit less pushed into the market. I say that, of course, they've still got production lines for EVs that they need to keep running, but perhaps the slightly more adaptable ones who can change their output, who don't have a dedicated electric vehicle factory or line or whatever, maybe they'll stop pushing them in quite the same way. I don't know. Tom, what do you make of this story?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. Do you say they price drop 7% and then increase of 31% in buying interest?
Yeah. Sorry,
it was something like that. It was more growth than there was price drop. I guess it's interesting because no one really knows what the tipping point is, because obviously EVs are seen as more expensive, and they are in most cases, than the ICE cars. And there is various things that are holding back people from buying EVs, but price is obviously a big one. So you take that down to a certain level, and I think suddenly there will be quite a massive unlock. And that's, I guess, what this is pointing towards, where you sort of drop a bit and it goes up a lot. So I think that's really interesting. And over the next year, 2 years, that we're really going to be able to test that. I think when they start all being much of a muchness on price, that's when you're really going to test what the real headwinds are in terms of consumer demand. I think the other interesting bit here is just the ongoing challenge for used car dealers on EV values, because with such volatile pricing and likelihood of reductions, it's very hard then to go, I'm going to buy a car at this and feel safe that I'm going to make a profit on it. So there is, we know, some real challenges which need to get overcome in the used EV market, and all these price fluctuations in the new market certainly don't help that. So I think getting to a much more stability and predictability in this is going to really help that side of the market.
What are you guys seeing on your platform? Because you've kind of got the other side of the coin, haven't you, where dealers are getting a bit of a bargain from, it's the consumers that have taken the price hit,
Yeah,
So
I think so. I mean, we so not all of our dealers will buy EVs. First of all, so there are quite a lot of dealers that just don't, and that's not just because they don't like them. It's because if they want to be able to, they need like software and capabilities to be able to, properly assess batteries. That they know they can fix the software in these different cars, and not all of them have that capability. Although I think most are building it, and so they're typically not as competitive as petrol and diesel cars on the platform, and we have to make sure our pricing is attractive to dealers and protects their margins. So generally, we try and get as good as we can for consumers, but they have also much less clarity on what the car's worth, and so it is still a relatively small part of our stock mix, but it is growing, and it's something that we're spending a lot of time on from a product point of view. How do we assess EVs differently to petrol and diesel cars so that dealers have the information they need? For example, how do we get battery health profiled so that dealers have that security when they buy the cars? So we're seeing very good activity. We're getting a lot of the newer cars starting to filter in. So we're having like BYDs coming through the platform now, which is really interesting, and they're getting actually a lot of interest from dealers. JQs are starting to come through. So this is all, I think, quite interesting, and you can feel it bubbling, but there's still a lot of uncertainty on both sides of the marketplace, and so that is reflected in pricing, which can be a big opportunity for dealers.
Interesting. I think there's bargains to be had.
Definitely.
Lovely. Shall I move us on then?
Yes.
I'm going to talk about the FCA.
I'll choose something nice and simple for me to get my head around in 5 minutes, John.
Yeah, I mean,
I need a timeout now.
It's 6 o'clock in the morning here, and I've just had a coffee.
Oh, yeah, true.
But the FCA have said some things about what's going to happen after the Supreme Court verdict, whenever that may come in it's a few weeks' time now, isn't it? It's about a month away, in theory. So obviously there's limited things that they can say, but they've outlined how a redress scheme may or may not work if they choose to do one or not. But what they are urging is for customers not to approach law firms, which is easier said than done, of course, because all you have to do is go on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and you are assaulted with, have you owned or financed a car since 1989? If so, you might be entitled to £5 compensation. So the FCA would really rather you didn't do that. The FCA want to, if they feel is necessary, implement their own redress scheme in the sort of style of the PPI situation, I suppose.
Manage it. Yeah.
I mean, we've written a story about this, and it's all a little bit wishy-washy at this point in terms of the information that they're giving out. It's more of, you can see what they're trying to do is dampen the fire of what's going on at the minute, because a lack of information about what's going to happen feeds a frenzy of you could be entitled to thousands of pounds, and that's not necessarily going to be the case, says the FCA. So when they make a decision after the Supreme Court, the FCA, they want to bring in a redress scheme within 6 weeks of this judgment coming out. But what they're going to make sure they do is that it's got to be level with where they think compensation should be. So the one thing they're particularly worried about is sending finance companies into the red and knocking them out of the market altogether as a result of paying so much compensation out. Because ultimately, as they say, that reduces competition, which is not good for consumers in the first place. But what I've taken away from this, I've not explained this very well, but what I've taken away from this is that they're not actually committing to setting up a scheme at all in this. If you read through their release they've put on their website, they're going to make a judgment based on, I mean, where's the exact wording? They're going to implement legal tests that must be met to introduce any redress scheme. So, as far as they're concerned, I'm quoting, "It must appear to us that there has been a widespread or regular failure to comply with the requirements, such that consumers have suffered or may suffer loss or damage, which a court would grant a remedy or relief." So, there's a possibility that there will be no redress scheme at all, but I don't know. I don't know what I would put my money on as to how this is going to go. What about you, Rebecca?
My opinion is that I just don't see how they could even. Well, not I can see how they can, but I just think it's so unfair to fine people for following the rules. Like even if
Yeah.
the rules are wrong. And yeah, I do think it's wishy-washy, and I don't know. They can't say that much, can they? Because they don't know what the outcome's going to be. But my opinion is they should have said something a long time ago, because it's obviously been bubbling along and there's been all this uncertainty. What we actually needed was the FCA to come out and say, we're the authority, like these are the rules. They were wrong and this is what you do now and this is what's going to happen. But yeah, it's just going to be more ambulance chasers and as you say, we don't want people going bust, because not only, as you say, is that going to reduce competition, but these are big companies that lots of people have finance with, not only for their cars, and that all causes upset and makes everyone's life harder in a time where it's already hard enough with banks and finance and things like that. So,
and I mean, ultimately, the FCA can say yes or no, we're going to launch a redress scheme, but they can't stop anyone taking finance companies to court if they really want to. You know, that they don't have a right over stopping people taking out.
No, like how they've got into this in the first place, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Tom, is a very complex and difficult story to talk about, but
I'm not sure I have a huge amount to add, but I definitely agree with what Rebecca was saying. And, just all this uncertainty and lack of clarity, it means that everyone has to do so much work to try and understand what the implications are for them. And to your earlier point, definitely you get this secondary market bubbling up of like, we'll help you make up to £20,000 if you've been a victim of this. And really what they need to do is just get as clear as possible to try and cut through all of that noise, because clearly it's something that's caused a lot of unnecessary confusion, and that means time and sort of wasted energy trying to work it all out. So I guess it's good news that they are they're recognizing they need to get to clarity, and they're probably not going to be able to fix the things they did in the past, but they just need to focus on getting clarity for all the players in this issue over the coming months. So let's see what happens.
Agreed. Back over to Rebecca.
It's going to be the never-ending story, isn't it, this episode? But then they all are. I was going to talk about Cox Automotive saying that they're cautiously optimistic about the new car market, with registration set to rise. I thought this was an interesting read about they're predicting. Let me find the specifics. Cox has unveiled its new car forecast for the year, which estimate over 2 million registrations in the 12 months to the end of December. That figure would represent a year-on-year rise of 5.7% and a chunky 29.1% rise from the COVID-effective lows of 2022. And I always think back to pre-COVID, talking like I say, these stories never go away. But we used to every year be talking about whether we would go over 3 million cars registered in the year. all these people, dealer bosses, saying they thought it was going to go over 3 million. And to see things are moving in the right direction, and we can talk about these stories again. I don't think we're ever going to get to 3 million, but yeah, it's just an interesting read, particularly touching on things about the Chinese brands, BYD, JQ and Omoda, reshaping the UK's brand hierarchy, challenging legacy manufacturers to innovate and adapt. Which, yeah, it's just an interesting read with some points from Phil Nottard that I'd recommend people go over and delve into, because there's a lot of stuff in there. But yeah, I don't know.
I will say BYD, JQ, and Omoda will be thrilled to be labelled as reshaping the UK's brand hierarchy. I think they'll be printing that out and sticking it up on their wall.
But it's true though, isn't it?
Well, it is. I don't know if I necessarily agree with the second half of that sentence, which is challenging legacy manufacturers to innovate and adapt. I don't know if they is it innovate so much as make things cheaper. I would say. I don't think. I mean, that's a bit unfair on BYD, but Omoda and JQ, I think, are price led.
I think I was only talking to you about this last week. Excuse me. Saying about I was writing a story. I think it was about Swansway taking on it's another BYD showroom or something. And just so many of these dealer groups that I just think I cannot. If I could go back in time 5 years and say to these people, you are going to have dealerships selling new electric cars, and that's all they're going to be. And I know not all of these are just all electric cars, but a large part of their offerings are electric cars, and they'd be like, no way, no chance.
Yeah, and they're going to be made in China and a brand new.
Yeah, they're going to be made in China. They'd be really cheap, and they'd be like, no way are we doing that. And
yeah, you're absolutely right. And that Ford franchise you've got, you won't want that anymore.
Exactly, they just would not believe you. But yeah, I just think that the way things have changed so fast, I just cannot. Every time I read a story about these Chinese brands, I just cannot believe how fast it's happened. And I know everyone will say it's just that's what Chinese brands are like. But I think if you look back at the Japanese and Korean brands, they're probably thinking like, how did it take us this long to be accepted?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the Cox figures. So
Yes.
what? 5.7% rise.
Yeah.
They reckon.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure where that's come from. Where's the increase in demand? Is it? Well, it's not an increase in demand, is it? Is there an increase in demand, or is it just that manufacturers are pushing more into the market? I don't know.
Well, I think it's because these new brands. Analysis of the year to date.
But there's no more customers than before.
Well, no. Well, there are still the same number of people in the UK, John. I don't know how many more there are or how many more drivers there are. They say this is still 9.8% below pre-pandemic averages.
Yes, that is true. Okay. Tom, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think you have to take all of these forecasts with a very large pinch of salt, but at the same time, it's good to see a bit of optimism. And I think it gels with what we're seeing from other people we talk to, that generally the feeling is pretty positive on the market for the rest of this year. I don't think anyone's expecting it to go insane. But it does feel like it's solid, and that we're sort of returning to a little bit more predictable growth curves. So I think that's good. To the point about same number of people in the UK, there was definitely a shift post-COVID from new to used. Just people considering buying a new car. I think it actually really helped the used car market, that generally, other than the increase in demand. People who maybe didn't used to consider used cars were sort of saying, actually, I'm just going to get a kind of 3-year-old, I don't know, Audi SUV instead of a brand new one this time. And then realizing that was a great experience and actually economically makes a lot more sense. And so I don't know if those people will ever jump back to going, I'm always buying new. And so interesting to see what's happening with that margin and whether people are kind of still going between the two. And then, yeah, on the Chinese brands, it is really... this is a very real shift that we're going to see a lot more of. Trump tariff, we shouldn't get into the whole tariff debates, but we don't have those tariffs. And, so the UK, I think, is a real target for those manufacturers. And I think consumers will benefit from very attractive price offers. And I saw a stat, something like BYD's something like 500% more cars sold. Can't remember what month it was, in March or something, than it was last year. I mean, that's like, and it's not off a tiny base. I think that they're doing decent
Yeah, it's
volume.
actually, I've got it here. I think this is BYD. 631% year-on-year growth
Yeah, I
between
mean,
January and April.
it's huge. It's not easy to do that either when you're manufacturing. When you start, because a lot of the traditional manufacturers have had decades to build up that kind of manufacturing volume, and just have the operations. But I think that's something that Chinese have proved incredible at, right? They can scale up at that pace. So yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting and generally good to see a bit of positive percentages. So yeah.
Well, I'm going to move away from positive and go for a negative story. About Trade Centre Group, enormous car supermarket operator, has sadly swung to a £5.4 million loss in 2024, blaming very challenging, they say, used car market conditions, which, yeah, I can absolutely understand that. I mean, this is yet another story along these lines. We've had very few stories that say something positive happened to results in 2024, particularly for anyone whose business is wrapped up in the used car market. And I think also used car supermarkets, particularly because there's just not as much money in each car when you're trying to shift them as quickly as these businesses do. So their pre-tax profit in 2023 was 6.58 million, just for clarity. And it's gone into the red by 5.4 million, as I say. Turnover also fell, along with the number of used car sales as a whole. But the directors are committed to returning the firm to a profit. And I mean, I don't think Trade Centre Group can disappear overnight or anything. I think this is much in the same vein as all the other results we've seen, as I say. But James loves talking about results things, not that he's here.
No, I thought they had a bad year last year.
Well, I think every car supermarket group had a bad year. It's a drop in values compared to massively inflated ones before. It's just quite a push market for. I mean, Trade Centre's not operating necessarily at the motor point level of nearly new cars, is it? It's a bit further down the scale, I would say. But yeah, it's not. I don't think it's an uncommon situation what they found themselves in.
Yeah, I'm sure. Really, the swing is probably a small margin for them when you're looking at turning over 275 million. Well, that's quite a lot down, isn't it?
I'm sorry to hand it to you again, Tom.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of things that happened last year, and as we've just discussed, a lot of businesses had challenges through last year, given all the things that happened in the market. So this is more a story about the market in 2024 than it is about Trade Centre. And they're a huge business, been around a long time, and they're a great business. And to Rebecca's point, it doesn't take a huge amount of tweaks to go completely the opposite direction. So I think probably what it underlines is that no business is in the used car market is shielded from moves that are happening in the market and on pricing. And particularly when you're holding a large amount of stock, significant pricing moves have a significant impact. So I don't think there's anything hugely either worrying there or particularly surprising. So, my sense, and from talking to all of our partners, is that this year has got quite a different shape. So I suspect that we're going to see a very different set of results next year, and hopefully across lots of businesses.
Well, let's hope so. Have you got any more, Rebecca? It's slightly running out of time.
Yes,
Just
I
say
did.
no.
I did. No, I do. I've got a very important one, John. Which is, of course, that the Car Dealer Podcast Live is back in September, sponsored by Motorway.
Sponsored by who? Motorway. Good. Sorry, just plugging the brand again then.
Yeah. Very excited. And again, for the second year, which is very nice to have Motorway back. But yeah, on September 24th, the podcast will be going live back to Oxfordshire with some exciting guests to come. So people can now get their tickets to come and join us for a night of fun in the hopefully sunshine.
Yes. Yeah, we had a good time last year, didn't we? We did like barbecue outside. Thankfully, it didn't rain.
Yes.
And had a very lively audience, which is what you want. Although they were quite well behaved.
I've been begging them to give us a late night bar this year as well, because that was the main feedback from last year. Was we need to be able to drink for longer, I think was the. But yeah, and it went far too fast last year as well. So we're actually starting a bit earlier at 4 p.m. this year. So yes, very excited about that.
So as you say, we'll be announcing our guests soon, won't we? But
And I feel like
if you do want
it's going
to,
to come really fast.
yeah, it's not far away.
No.
If you want to get in on the action early, because we do have limited tickets, it's not an enormous room. You can head to the website. I'll put a link in the show notes below, and you can either get a ticket to walk in or a ticket to walk in and stay overnight.
Are you going to do a podcast offer as well, John? Put you on the spot as you built the system.
Possibly, maybe next week, because I don't have that information to hand at the moment because I've been caught off guard.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be a discount for podcast listeners, so make sure you listen next week to get your offer.
Yeah, so what I've basically done there is ruined the point of talking about that story, haven't I? But there we are. Don't book now, book next week.
I thought about it when I was reading it. There is an offer. I just don't think there's a code yet.
Yes, pretty much. I mean, this has been the most professional podcast I've hosted yet, I think.
I was going to add really quickly, but it's gone now. But the helicopter doing... I don't know if you mentioned why James had gone.
Yes.
Yes, the helicopter from James's rescue. I could see it outside the window, and I was just thinking if he'd stayed, he would have been here like this. You should see it over there.
We could have been out in the garden.
Pardon?
Would James be in the helicopter, or would he be on a boat?
Yeah, he'll be on the boat underneath.
Okay.
They'll. I've no idea what the job is, but.
No, it's. I've seen the email. It was some strange. Sorry, this is very uninteresting for listeners, but I'm sure James will talk next week about whatever strange rescue operation he's been involved in. So, Tom, are there any stories you think we should have talked about this week, but we haven't?
No, I think we covered a lot there, and yeah, some interesting ones. So, do I now have to pick?
You do, I'm afraid.
Well, I'm going to be boring and pick the positive one, which is Rebecca's story about... Was it Rebecca? I can't remember whose it was, actually.
I don't do positive.
Yeah, it's positive.
Okay, well, I'm going to pick the one about positive signs about the new car market growth this year, and I think it resonates, and I think that's good news. And to some of the other points around the FCA and last year's challenges and all of that in the market, I think it's good to have a bit of positivity, and I think we should all get behind that.
Yeah, definitely. Unusual
Absolutely.
on this podcast.
Well, very well deserved win, Rebecca.
Thank you. I will not be back next week.
Well, thank you for stepping in and dealing with that. And Tom, thank you for joining us and chatting to us about all things AI and motorway, of course. Etc. It's been lovely to have you on.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. And thank you as well for listening. We will be back next week with another episode, so make sure you're subscribed so you can be notified when that goes live. If you want to check out the stories we've mentioned today, take a look in the show notes below or head to cardealermagazine.co.uk. Don't forget to have a look at Car Dealer Podcast Live. I will put the magic code, which I don't know off the top of my head, in the show notes underneath, so you can book tickets with 10% off, I believe it is. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.